best teams left in the league. You had on the eastern side the number 1 seeded Boston Celtics taking on the 6th seeded Indiana Pacers, and on the west you had the number 3 seeded Minnesota Timberwolves taking on the number 5 seeded Dallas Mavericks. So, if you happen to catch any of these games, you will know that this was a very tight-knit series on both ends, regardless of what the final outcomes were. This might be a spoiler. If you haven't seen the series, just spoiler alert, the Boston Celtics swept the Indiana Pacers 4-0, and the Minnesota Timberwolves were defeated. I don't know why I went with numbers, but yeah, the Dallas Mavericks, gentlemen, swept them 4-1. So those were the two outcomes. And if you want a more detailed analysis, then you've come to the right place. I will do a very thorough recap of each of these. So yeah, if you enjoy content like this, feel free to like, comment, or subscribe. And yeah, let's get right into it. So first up, let's start with the West. The Timberwolves and the Mavericks. As I already mentioned, this series ended in just 5 games, with the Mavericks taking it 4-1. And I'll be honest, this game as a shock to me. I thought that this would be a very competitive matchup, as it was, but I didn't think that it would end so soon or that it would go in Dallas's favor. I personally believe that after watching the Timberwolves fight against the Nuggets in the way that they did, battling back from what I thought was a doom situation, I had a lot of faith in them, and so I thought that the T-Wolves would advance in 7 games. And no, the Mavericks are a much stronger team than I was giving them credit for. I was giving them their fair share of credit, but they are next level. So in this series, you had the Minnesota Timberwolves averaging 105.6 points per game to the Dallas Mavericks' 111.4. You'll notice that it looks like a pretty big margin, 6 points, but I'll get to why it really wasn't in a little bit. Then, on the rebounding front, you have the Dallas Mavericks out-rebounding Minnesota 41.4 to 38.8. Now, this is actually quite interesting because obviously you have 3 bigs in Minnesota who are all very talented and pretty solid rebounders. Maybe Nas Reed, not as much so, because he's a little bit shorter than Cat and Gobert. But, Dallas has their fair share of bigs that can rebound. Daniel Gafford, a 7-footer. Derek Lively, the rookie sensation. And, PJ Washington, I don't think he's quite as tall, but he's still solid on the boards. Plus, Luka's a triple-double machine, so he's grabbing those as well. And then in the assist category, you have the Minnesota Timberwolves leading the Dallas Mavericks 23.0 to 21.2. So, as you can see, two columns go in favor to the Mavs, 1 column in favor to the Timberwolves. As far as series leaders, you have the main focus points of the two narratives. As the series progresses, people are always constantly trying to make comparisons to current players and old players. You've been getting a lot of Jordan comparisons for Anthony Edwards, and then on Luka's side, Luka had a sensational performance, absolutely marvelous in this round. He wasn't shooting as poorly as his previous 2 series, so he really stood out. And Luka, with his early success and just his dominance on the court, he gets Larry Bird comparisons and LeBron comparisons. So let's hear about their stats now. Anthony Edwards in this series, he was averaging 24.6 points per game, 8.8 rebounds per game, and 7.8 assists per game. Honestly, very impressive all across the board, especially for a guard like himself. Definitely hounding those rebounds as much as he could for his size. The 24.6 points per game, they are a bit lower than his previous 2 series. He didn't start off this series shooting the best. He talked his talk heading into it, said, I got Kyrie, and then I think in game 1, he really figured out that Kyrie is not an easy dude to guard. He was definitely gassed at many points in that game, and you could see that was affecting all parts of his game as a whole. And then on the other end, you have Luka Doncic, who was doing it all in this series. He averaged 32.4 points per game, 9.6 rebounds per game, and 8.2 assists per game. And even though that is a crazy stat line, I think Luka has just made us all accustomed to it. He's kind of reached that threshold where it's like Westbrook in his MVP years, where if anyone else were to get that stat line, it would be like, wow, what a marvelous, amazing thing they've accomplished. But for Luka or Westbrook back then, it's like, oh yeah, this is everyday stuff. And, you know, maybe with this finals trip and everything that's going on with Luka right now, maybe that's the urge he needs to actually win the MVP next year. You know, he's been battling for it. Everyone accepts that he's like phenomenal on offense and that he's definitely in that MVP conversation. But I don't think that he's been getting necessarily all the votes that he deserves. So perhaps next year it'll be his time to shine. So with that, now let's go into a game-by-game breakdown of everything that's happening in this series. So game one, you have a very close matchup. The Dallas Mavericks take this 108 to 105. They steal home court from Minnesota, and it honestly was a very close game. It wasn't far at all. I was watching this game, and until like the last couple minutes, I want to say it was very competitive. I'm trying to figure out if this was game one or game two that I have in front of me. Oh, yes. So in game one, the Timberwolves had a lead with less than 5 minutes left. Honestly, I think in the first 4 games, Minnesota had a lead with 5 minutes left at some point in it, so that shows how close it was. Obviously, in that span, they went 1-3, so their last 5-minute execution wasn't the best. But you have to remind yourselves that the other team does have Kyrie, who is a closing specialist, and Luka Doncic, who is fantastic. So their defense was only so good. You can only limit a super juggernaut offense so much. So yeah, honestly, this was Minnesota's game to win. I feel like both teams, they were battling all through and through. It was very tight-knit, constant back and forth. No team really got a big lead at any point. But with like 2 minutes left, with 2 minutes left in this game, Minnesota had the lead. I believe it was, where is it? 102 to 101. They had a 1-point lead with about 3 minutes left. And then over the next 2 minutes, Minnesota has 3 straight turnovers. They have a bad pass from Jaden McDaniels. Then they have an offensive goaltending on Cat. And then they have Mike Conley turning the ball over. And so with that, that's basically how they sold. They had a solid shot to win this game, and they just couldn't put it away with bad turnovers. And then there was a slight chance towards the very end. Mike Conley was fouled on a 3. They were down, I believe, 4 points. And so the idea is you make the first 2, you kind of intentionally kick it out and either tie the game or take the lead. But Mike Conley missed his second free throw, and at that point it's like, okay, well, you can't do anything. Like, your best hope is you miss the free throw, you kick it out, you hit a 3, and then it's tie game. And yeah, they just didn't have enough time, really. There was 2 seconds left in the game, and they did not get the rebound. So game 1 goes to Dallas. Then you have game 2. Game 2 was another one where the Mavericks really stole it at the end. Obviously, it was very close and competitive all throughout, but just another game in which the Minnesota Timberwolves sold. So with about 5.5 minutes left in this game, 4.5 minutes left in this game, the Minnesota Timberwolves were leading the Dallas Mavericks 104 to 102. And then the Mavericks went on a 14-3 run to end the game. It was just an onslaught from that point on. They if you're a Timberwolves fan, but this shows that like the series wasn't that one-sided at all. Obviously, it is a gentleman's sweep, but these first two games, Minnesota could have very easily won them. And then you have Game 3. Game 3 is the one that's really... Oh, sorry. I think I was describing Game 3 just then. My mistake. Everything that I just said about the onslaught and throwing away the game, that was not Game 2. That was Game 3. Game 2 was, it was just a clutch shot from Luka. The T-Wolves were up with like 30 seconds left. They had a clear lead. And then Luka hits a step back three over Rudy Gobert and really just puts them away. It was a crazy shot. On Defensive Player of the Year, he really like hunted Rudy Gobert for the shot and cooked him and then stepped back and hit the game winner. So all three of the first games, Minnesota is now in an 0-3 hole, and they have to be like kind of I forget what the phrase is, shooting themselves in the foot. I guess that's not really what I want to say. They are shooting themselves in the foot. Obviously, like Game 2, I'm not gonna discredit them. Like, I don't think that they did anything wrong. It was just an amazing shot. Whereas Games 1 and Game 3, they really could have won it, and they just sold. Then finally in Game 4, it was looking a little bad. Like a very close game. It's the same situation, but with that 2-minute mark left, even though Minnesota has the lead, as a fan, like, I'm sure there was tension. As a player, I'm sure there's stress, because like this is where you folded in every single previous game. Cat was playing this game with a bunch of fouls. He has 5 fouls, and a lot of them were like really stupid fouls. Reggie Moore was going off on him all game about like the brain dead fouls that he was committing in this game. And so yeah, with not that much time left in the game, he fouls Luka and fouls out of the game, and it's looking bad. But that too is like, it really was not a foul. Cat jumped up in the air, and yes, he moved forward a bit, but Luka fully waits and then dives straight into him. He's not looking to take the shot at all. He literally is just throwing himself into Cat. And by the rules of the game, that is exactly what they outlawed. That is the exact kind of motion that the NBA said they were trying to get rid of and wanted to call an offensive foul going forward. And it was patrolled kind of heavily, and like, I want to say it was 1 or 2 seasons ago when it was implemented, and they did a pretty good job of removing it. But even though they used Luka Doncic in the like example video of what they were trying to get rid of, they did not call it here, and it was a little bit puzzling. But luckily, it didn't cost Timberwolves all that much. I don't agree with the foul call at all. Luka shot the free throws, and then with like 20 seconds left in the game, the Timberwolves were up. They're up a fair amount, maybe like 6, and it was looking like a done deal. But then Luka hits this crazy three, like just hoist the ball up in the air. His eyes are closed. It doesn't look like a real shot, and it goes in, and he gets fouled. So at that point, I'm sure everyone in Minnesota had their hearts sink a little bit. Watching it, I was like, there's no way they come back from this too, right? But then he missed the free throw, and so it didn't really matter. And yeah, so Game 4 goes to Minnesota. Then you have all the talk about like, oh, are they going to be the first team to come back from 0-3? And like, you have a fair argument for it, just because every game was so close. You're not getting blown out in any of these. It was anyone's game in the last 5 minutes for every single game. You could make the argument that like, sure, the next 3 games, if they just execute correctly, maybe they can do it, maybe they can come back. It's anyone's game. But yeah, all of that went to bed with the dominant Game 5 victory from the Dallas Mavericks. The Mavericks won 124 to 103, and it's a 21-point victory, but realistically, it was over at halftime. At just a half, Minnesota was being outscored by 29 points. That inflated up to 36 points in the third quarter. And then there was a period where like ants started draining a few threes in a row. Things started to click a bit. I think that Minnesota was able to cut it down to like 20 points, maybe 21 points before the fourth quarter. Then it kind of went up again. close games that could have gone anywhere, like in any direction. And then you had Game 5 where Kyrie and Luka, I think Luka had a 20-point first quarter, and the Timberwolves scored 19 in the first quarter. Then at halftime, I want to say Luka and Kyrie combined were outscoring the Timberwolves' entire team. And yeah, Luka and Kyrie finished with 36 apiece. And at the end of the series, Luka Doncic was named the Western Conference Finals MVP. So he gets to add another trophy to his collection. Because he has like Rookie of the Year and his All-Star bids and his All-NBA bids. And the Timberwolves, they walk away. I feel like they've got to be solidly impressed with their season. I don't think anyone was expecting that big of a jump, and for them to go as deep as they did. But to take out the defending champions, to really battle it out with the Suns, and then, yeah, obviously you lost in 5 here, but you put your heart into these games, your heart and soul, and it was very close for a lot of them. So, valiant effort from the Timberwolves. I feel like they'll be around in the years coming, and it's not going anywhere. He's not going to let us forget about him. And yeah, hopefully they can just do better next year. And with the Mavericks, you've got to be impressed. You know, this backcourt duo, when it first was announced, it was very shocking, you know, that they're trading for Kyrie from the Nets. Obviously, he had such turmoil and caused the Nets franchise such a headache for some reasons that were valid, for some reasons where it was like, really, you're going to punish him that much for that thing? Either way, it was like a toxic relationship for them both. Then the Mavs acquire him. They missed the play-in. It was looking horrible at first, and then this year, off to a strong start, and then even more trade deadline moves, and they really put together a unit, like a very solid unit. So, congrats on the Mavs advancing Luka's first finals. Kyrie has the chance to win another championship. We'll see how it goes for them. But now we shall move into the other conference, the East. So in the East, you had, as I mentioned before, a 4-0 sweep by the Boston Celtics over the Indiana Pacers. In this series, the Boston Celtics were averaging 119.5 points per game to the Pacers' 112.8. The Pacers were leading in the rebounding category, 48.8 to 40.8 of the Celtics. And the Pacers were also leading in assists per game with 29.3 assists per game to the Celtics' 26. So here you have a bit of a more uncommon outcome where the team that lost, and they lost badly, or not badly, but they lost 4 straight. They were actually outperforming in 2 of the 3 major categories. And yeah, yet again, this series was just defined by clutch. Which team was more clutch, which team was able to perform better in the final minutes of the game. If this series, like if basketball games were just 3 quarters long, then maybe the Indiana Pacers would have been in the finals. Like they played 3 quarters of basketball really well. They were almost always in it until the end, except for game 2. But yeah, they fell apart even harder than the Timberwolves in a lot of these cases. So before we get into that, let's just talk about the series leaders. On the Celtics side, you only have 1 player listed, but really it was a dynamic duo of Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. With Jason Tatum being the representative here on my screen, he finished the series averaging 30.3 points per game, 10.3 rebounds per game, and 6.3 assists per game. Very good numbers. His rebounding has been immaculate in the playoffs, and he continues to prove that he's a good rebounder in this one. And he also was able to get that 30-point per game average. And then on the Pacers side, you have Pascal Siakam leading the way with 23.3 points per game, 7.5 rebounds per game, and 4.5 assists per game. So, as I was saying, this was honestly a lot of fumbles from the Pacers side. Game 1, you have the Pacers playing in Boston, and it is a very close game all throughout until like the very last couple seconds. It is close. Then in like the last 2 minutes, the Pacers get a solid lead. They look like they're going to take this game. They're going to steal home court from Boston. And the last 30-second execution is horrendous. They have 2 turnovers in the last minute of the game. They allow Boston to get a crazy shot off to tie the game, and then heads into overtime. last minute really like shows the inexperience of their team, their sloppiness. And so Boston is able to capitalize. They go into overtime, and Boston just outduels them in the extra period, and they steal home court back. So it's 133 to 128 in favor of Boston in Game 1. Obviously, I feel like Boston has been getting a lot of criticism for playing injured teams or for playing in the East, which isn't something they control at all. But yeah, after Game 1, even though Boston won, I feel like a lot of people were just saying like, wow, they really had to steal home court back. They stole a victory at home. Watch out, Boston. And Boston kind of puts that to rest with their much more dominant Game 2. Game 2, they win 126 to 110. That is more in the fashion that I feel like they were expected to win. I didn't expect them to have to battle back like that in Game 1. I didn't think that they were just going to win it flat out, but Game 2 was a much more characteristic Boston Celtics game of this compared to what I was expecting. And then Game 3. This is one that I had to pull up because boy oh boy, is it rough. Just I feel for all Pacers fans out there, however many of you there really are. I don't know. I've never met an Indiana Pacers fan. I'm sure they exist, but either way, this was a truly impressive choke job by the Pacers. With 2.5 minutes left in the game, the Pacers have an 8-point lead, with 2.5 minutes. And what do they do? So at that point, it is 2 minutes 38 seconds. DJ McConnell makes a 2-point shot. They lead 109 to 101. Then we go forward, and with 38 seconds left in the game, it is now a tie game, 111 to 111. And that too, on that shot, with 38 seconds left, Drew Holiday was fouled, so he gets to shoot a free throw. So in exactly 2 minutes, they blew the entire lead. They're up 8. And it's just, they allowed the Celtics to go on an 11-2 run with 2.5 minutes left. So in just 2 minutes, the Celtics are in the lead, and then they just finish them out. I don't know. I don't really know how you can manage to do something like that. Like, that is Warriors level elite choking. These last 2 seasons, the Warriors have been like allergic to clutch time. Obviously, they play in a lot of clutch time games, but they're not always doing very well in those situations. This was like a Warriors performance. I hate to say it, as a deep Warriors fan, that was amazing. It's one of those where it's like, how the heck did you lose that game? So now the Indiana Pacers are already punching themselves over their Game 1 victory, the Game 1 loss, and now Game 3 as well. So then you go into Game 4, and Game 4 is like almost the same situation. Obviously, it's not as egregious of a choke, but it is still quite bad. This one is more 6 minutes, 5.5 minutes left in the game. Indiana is up 8 once again. 5.5 minutes is quite a long time, but it's just in that time how much they got outscored by. You're up 8, and then you allow Boston to go on a 15-4 run to win the game. And you take a look at games 3 and 4. Indiana was up going into the 4th period, like up a decent amount. You lost by 3 points in Game 3, but you were outscored by 12 in the 4th period. So you had a 9-point lead heading into it. Then in Game 4, you got outscored by 6 points. You lost by 3. So you had a 3-point advantage going into the 4th period. It's just being able to execute when it matters. Indiana just could not do it. Boston was by far the better team in that capacity. So a great 3 quarters of basketball in each game by Indiana, but it was that final period that sets the Boston Celtics aside from the rest of the Pacers, I guess, in this series, but really the rest of the East. They are just able to play very well for 48 minutes, and the Pacers could not do that. Obviously, I do have to mention Tyrese Haliburton did not play in Game 4. He was injured. And so props to the Pacers for keeping it so competitive. They almost were able to steal one without their leader. It was really funny. I got a text from my friend right as like the Pacers had their home stretch lead, saying like, Pacers better not blow this one again. And then I get another text 10 minutes later, and he's like, bro. It was a very funny sequence of events. But yeah, just like that, the Boston Celtics are heading back to the finals. They went to the finals 2 years ago where they faced off against the Warriors. The Warriors in those Western Conference finals actually defeated the Mavericks. So both of these teams have been like floating around that final step for a little bit. The Celtics lost against the Warriors, as everyone knows, but they're looking to get it done against Dallas. And yeah, this series will be very entertaining just because like Boston, I think, is the most well-built and put-together team. Right now they're operating without Porzingis. Hopefully they're able to get him back. They have a huge break until they have to play their next game. I think game 1 is on Thursday, so they get a solid week, or more than a week of rest, because they were done with their series before the other guys. So hopefully that time allows Porzingis to heal up and get him back, whether he starts immediately or if he comes off the bench. But yeah, Boston is great on defense and they're great on offense. They have a bunch of people who can all score the ball really well. And so that will be entertaining. They also have just like really good defensive guards. You've got Derek White, you've got Drew Holiday. And so the Mavericks, I do think of them as like more of a two-headed monster. You have a lot of really good role players. You've got like Derek Lively showing up and showing out. PJ Washington can go off on any given day. Daniel Gafford had all those games where he didn't miss a single shot. THJ, Tim Hardaway Jr., he's kind of been a non-factor, sitting on the bench doing nothing so far these playoffs. Maybe he randomly decides to turn up, but I honestly don't think he's going to get enough minutes to find that out. So yeah, really it is just Kyrie and Luka that are so good, and most of the game is going to be won through them. So it'll be interesting to see how the Boston Celtics match up against them. Obviously, everyone thought that the Timberwolves defense was elite and that they would be able to maybe shut them down, and that wasn't really the case. It was only in Game 4, I believe, that they had success in making them look guardable. But in all the other games, they kind of just did whatever they felt like. So, yeah. But Boston, on the other hand, has like four different guys that can just give you 30 any given night. Like, obviously, Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, they were giving 40 every night, and they can give 40 every night. But Derek White is equally talented. He'll just pop off every once in a while. Drew Holiday, not as much so. Al Horford, not as much so. But you do get their surprise games. And then Porzingis is definitely a guy that can drop 30 if he's playing. So their roster is just like good. I like Boston's roster much more. And heading into the playoffs, I did have my bracket with the Boston Celtics winning it all. I thought that they would be playing Denver in the finals and winning against Denver. Obviously, it didn't pan out that way, but I still have my hopes in Boston. As great as the Mavs are. Oh, and I forgot to talk about the rivalry aspect of all of this. You've got two players playing against their old teams. Obviously, in the past, Luka and Porzingis were teammates. They were a duo that didn't really pan out, and so Porzingis got sent away, and now Porzingis is on the Celtics, so he gets to match up against his old team in the Dallas Mavericks and against his old counterpart, Luka. And then, on the other hand, you have Kyrie. Kyrie, after being with LeBron in Cleveland for all those years, he wants to make his own name, have his own team. He goes to Boston, and didn't really work. They were good, but he was hurt in the early playoff series, and then after being hurt, team chemistry just was never there. And then he goes to the Nets, and he really tries his best to disrespect Boston, like burns sage in their stadium after returning, and then he, in their playoff series against Boston, stomps on Lucky, the logo in the middle. He's flipping off fans, he's cussing out fans. The dude really does not like Boston at all. And so I think that is going to get a lot more media attention. Kyrie and his return against the Boston Celtics. A lot of these guys are dudes that he played with while he was there. I guess a lot is a stretch. At least the main guys. And then, yeah, in terms of accolades, I forgot to mention a couple. You have Jaylen Brown winning Eastern Conference Finals MVP. Jaylen Brown won Eastern Conference Finals MVP after averaging 29.8 points, 5 rebounds, and 3 assists per game while shooting 51.7%. And, yeah. So, I think really it was his shooting splits, because if you look at the numbers, Tatum was ahead in a lot of the ways, but he had that huge game where he dropped 40, and, yeah, he was very efficient from the field. So, I don't think anyone is really mad at Jaylen Brown winning this. Tatum got it 2 years ago when they played, and they are a two-headed monster. I feel like they'll be fine. But yeah, and then Joe Mazzulla, I think, becomes like the youngest head coach to take a team to the finals, something like that. So props to those guys. I feel like there's no reason to really talk about the Celtics' accomplishments, like not in a distasteful way, but I feel like everyone expected them to be good, and they have been really good. And just their trip to the finals, I personally thought that they were going to go to the finals the entire way through. There was no doubt in my mind that someone was really going to beat them. So, yeah, I'm not as impressed. They're doing exactly as well as I expected. Maybe slightly better. I did think that they would maybe have a series against the Knicks that would go to 7 games, but obviously they didn't play the Knicks. So, the sweep against the Pacers, yeah, I'll give them credit. I didn't think that would happen, but it's not like they're progressing further than I thought was in their limit. I think that their ceiling is winning the finals, and I still think that. So yeah, I think that about does it for this video. That is all you need to know in case you missed the Eastern and Western Conference Finals of this year's playoffs. Now you have enough information to know what happened. You only missed out on 9 games. And yeah, the finals will start next Thursday. They're going to have a big media break, some time for the players to heal up and, get ready for the finals. And it should be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to it. I think I have Boston in 6. That's what I'm going to go with. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy content like this, feel free to like, comment, or subscribe. Once again, I'll be putting out more videos somewhat like this as the week goes on. I will say that next week I have dead week. It's week 10 right before finals, and the following week I have finals. So I might have to slow down a little bit just because I have like a final paper due next Friday, and then I've got in the following week on Tuesday and Wednesday a bunch of final exams, and then it'll just be a mad rush to get all my stuff packed up and moved out, attend a couple friends' graduations, and then off to Denver I go once again.